in Rotherham, the whistleblowers came from an organization called Risky Business that worked with at-risk girls. They had an office. One morning they came in and they found that someone had got through the front door, got through the door into their office, got into the locked filing cabinet, and gotten onto the password-protected computer, and files that they had suddenly gone missing. And new documents had been written onto their computer, creating minutes of meetings that had never occurred. And they could prove hadn't occurred because the individual involved was on holiday at the time, wasn't even in the country, I think. So that was a real cover-up. Has anybody ever been prosecuted for that? No. We have no idea who did that. I mean, we can guess who did it, who had the keys and the passwords and everything else, but we don't know who did it.
All right, so we're going to take this interview in a slightly different direction than I've taken some of the other interviews here at ARC. You've been writing a lot about the grooming scandal here in the UK, which for about 2 weeks in the US, about a month ago, we were talking about quite heavily because Elon started tweeting about it. But before that, not much. Subsequently, not much. So I guess my first question to you is, how did you get involved in that, interested in that? And then where is it at the moment?
So the grooming gang scandal is about something that happened primarily in the 1990s and the early 2000s. It came out in the newspapers in Britain in the 2010s. And the big sort of marker is in 2014, there was a report into a town called Rotherham. And this is a not terribly large town. It's a fairly depressed area, steel works, somewhat left behind. And they found that within the time period they were looking at, there had been, they estimated, 1,400 girls raped, primarily by Pakistani gangs. That has subsequently been upgraded. The police now believe it's 1,510. And that obviously was a big story back in 2014, but Twitter was not quite as big. So it was a big story. And then over the years, it faded, as stories do. And I read about that story when I was a young man. I remember sitting at my grandmother's table and reading the papers and just being absolutely appalled by this. And then in about 2021, thought, what's going on with this? You know, nothing seems to change. These gangs still periodically pop up in the papers. There's a brief thing. We've sentenced some people. They've committed this. But nothing's changed. Nothing's actually ended. And so with a friend of mine, Charlie Peters, who's now a reporter at GB News, we got together and we started trying to make a film. And we made a film together, which GB News then acquired and broadcast, called Grooming Gangs, Britain's Shame. And we basically just put together for the first time in a film the whole story as well as we could. And then we followed it up with doing some reporting on basically tracking down the people involved. What had gone on in the sort of 10 years since? Mm-hmm. And the answer in most cases was nothing. They'd moved on. They got jobs. In some cases, it's quite nice jobs. Mm-hmm. A lot of the criminals had gone to jail and then, as is the case in Britain, usually get out after you served about half of your sentence. So a lot of them were back on the streets. They'd gone back to the community. So that laid the ground. And then early this year, Elon Musk got interested. And I love the way that Elon works. You can see that he uses Twitter to sort of learn in real time. Mm-hmm. And that he basically sped run the whole history of it. And it was fantastic. You know, he put the pressure on Britain and he asked the important question, which was, why the hell would you let this happen? Why the hell have you not done anything about it since? The government obviously freaked out and they've now made some small concessions. They said that they're going to do a sort of an assessment and they're going to do some local inquiries, but that's just code for shove it down the line.
Right. And of course, then we saw the usual attacks on Elon for even bringing it up and all of that kind of stuff. So there's sort of two things here. There's the horrific incidences themselves, obviously, but then there seems to be, it's a bit of an overused word these days, but a systemic cover-up within the entire system. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Definitely. So you've got probably two types of cover-up. You've got the cover-up that happened at the time. That's the cover-up at the local level. It's the police, it's the council, those people. We know about that because in a place like Rotherham, they had 2 inquiries. So we know that the authorities knew this was going on. We know that they were briefed on it and they said nothing, did nothing.
And why do you think that is?
I mean, they were afraid of race. Ultimately, that's it.
They didn't want to be called racist.
Yeah, they didn't want to be called racists. They're very clear. Like they would leave anything involving the Pakistani community to Pakistani heritage councillors or to imams. They didn't want to touch it. They made people censors. There's a famous quote where somebody was reporting on abuse involving Pakistani taxi drivers abusing girls. And they were told in the presentation, you must say men of a certain ethnicity involved in a certain occupation. So you had to cut race out. That is the reason why no one will touch it. That was the first cover-up, and that was, in some cases, a real cover-up. So in Rotherham, the whistleblowers came from an organization called Risky Business that worked with at-risk girls. They had an office. One morning they came in and they found that someone had got through the front door, got through the door into their office, got into the locked filing cabinet and gotten onto the password-protected computer, and files that they had suddenly gone missing. And new documents had been written onto their computer, creating minutes of meetings that had never occurred. And they could prove hadn't occurred because the individual involved was on holiday at the time, wasn't even in the country, I think. So that was a real cover-up. Has anybody ever been prosecuted for that? No. We have no idea who did that. I mean, we can guess who did it, who had the keys and the passwords and everything else, but we don't know who did it. Then you've got the sort of the second one, which is the more cultural cover-up. That's the don't look at it too closely.
Right.
So, it came out in 2014. There was a big scandal. It was a big stink. And then walk it back slow. Nobody wants to touch it because, all right, it's been there, but do you want to write an academic paper on that? Do you want to be called a racist? No, fine, leave it be. And the authorities, the people that did look into it, desperately tried to hide it. So you can look at the Home Office report in 2020. So finally, there was pressure on the Home Office. We're going to look at the contested issue. Is ethnicity a real issue here? Well, the civil servants deliberately tried to do nothing. And then when they're forced to do something, they produce a paper which is incredibly poor quality. It's the Home Office. They have access to all the data they want. They can question anybody they want. They can go into prisons and talk to all the abusers. They can talk to the police officers. They don't do any of that. What they do is they do a little summary of all the papers that have been done so far, all of which say the data quality is really bad. And they say, on the basis of this, we can say that the largest group of abusers in child sex cases are white. Well, most is not even the same as majority. That means like under 51%. And Britain is a country that at the moment is sort of about 75% white, was previously 85% white at the census before that, was 95% white at the census before that. If you're talking about a country that is overwhelmingly white and they're a small group, you're actually talking about other groups being overrepresented. And in fact, their own evidence admitted that. But all they wanted was that headline, whites are the largest group. And once they had that, they pretend nothing had happened.
So how do you connect this issue to more broadly what's happening with immigration and the demographics of the country and what so many people here are talking about and what you can see on the streets of London, which is that this country and this city have significantly changed?
Well, I think you've got two things. You've got culture. Why is this happening? To some degree, it's because there is a culture that said it was acceptable to target white girls, that they had a very different attitude. So if you look at...
Did they not go after any Pakistani girls? Was it exclusively white girls?
They did go after some Pakistani girls as well. So in the 1,400 in the J inquiry, I think about 140, 150 are Muslim or Pakistani. So about 10%. About 10%. But I would also point out that the offending method is different generally. So in those ones, what you're talking about is abusing girls within your family or close network, and it tends to be one-on-one. Mm-hmm. Whereas the difference with the rape gang stuff is it tends to be gang rape by large groups of people where you're sharing them around friends and family. Both are obviously very, very bad crimes, but they're different offending patterns, which again, I think comes back to the culture. There's a culture of, if I have the opportunity, I can rape this girl within my community, but these girls outside of the community, they are fair game and I can share them with my friends and we don't feel any shame or guilt about that. So the culture is a huge issue. And then I think the second one is the element of power that comes with demography. So one of the reasons in Rotherham why things didn't happen was because the local Labour Party needed Pakistani votes, needed the Pakistani councillors, and so they basically outsourced anything involving them to the community or to the community leaders. And those community leaders in many cases made poor, in some cases, I think, criminal decisions to essentially cover it up and not touch their own guys. I think what you can see in London with, let's say, the protests over Palestine and other things, is that when you have groups of people that are going to represent their interest, and if you have large groups of foreigners who've come into the country very fast, they haven't integrated terribly well, a lot of their interests are going to be the interests of where they come from, not the interests of the population as a whole. And I think that is one of the real dangers for Britain in the next sort of 10, 20 years, is that increasing trend towards sectarianism.
What do you think Britain is going to do about that? I mean, that seems to be one of the big questions that's happening on the main stage here.
I think it's the question for Europe. I think it's also to some degree the question for America. You could look at something like California, where you had, I'm forgetting the name of it, but the big vote back in the 1990s about Spanish, about, should English be the official language of California? They won that one, but there was a sort of gradual Hispanicization of certain things, and you did get low-level corruption with that, or community corruption.
Fortunately, as a Floridian, we don't consider California part of America anymore, so we're okay. But
there we go. You're fantastic.
Yeah.
Florida is the capital of Latin America.
Exactly.
So I think it's a huge issue across the entire West because it's just easier than ever before to emigrate to places, and that can be fantastic. That can be great. I myself live in a foreign country a lot of the time. My wife is an immigrant. My children have dual nationality. That's fantastic. But it also brings the bad things to the world. I particularly like the economist Garrett Jones, who has a great book called The Culture Transplant. And he points out that when you get people from other countries, they'll bring their culture. And that will include the good and the bad. So let's just pick an inoffensive example. If you bring over lots of French people, you'll probably get wonderful boulangerie. You'll probably get some great fashion. You might also get a sort of increase in adultery, but that's not the world's worst problem in a sort of developed country. But if you're bringing people over from the third world, you're going to get third world problems as well. That's not to cast aspersions on any individual, but if you bring over a group, you're going to get the aggregate. So I think everyone is tackling that issue at the moment. America is showing that borders matter, and they're actually going to, reintroduce that. They're going to get rid of people who've got no right to be there, and they're going to ensure the primacy of American values. I think that has to be the example for a lot of people across Europe and the West more generally.
Is it kind of strange that everyone is waiting for America to do the right thing? I mean, because you guys, the problems of Europe are far more significant, not to say ours aren't. And we've let in about 15 million people in probably 7 years, something like that. It's an extraordinary amount of people. But it doesn't seem like our problems, at least at the cultural level, are nearly as bad as what's going on in Europe. Definitely.
I think there's a level of cultural difference. So one of the advantages you've got is, a lot of the people coming to America are from south of the border. So, if you've been to Texas, like that stuff already crosses over a little bit. There's quite often a shared faith. Spanish is, of course, a European language. It's not a million miles away, whatever problems there come. In the case of Europe, increasingly the people that are coming from very foreign cultures, very different cultures, often cultures with links to the country already because of the imperial history, but with strong cultural difference. So I think that is a greater shift, a greater change for Europe. The reason why it's happening in America, I think, is partly because America is the leader of the West, partly because it has a more vibrant politics, partly because Donald Trump really did change things, a bit of great man theory. He really did shift things, and Europe has not had that yet. I think Europe's on a time lag, and a lot of these things will clip through, but everyone's going to be looking to America for guidance and encouragement. So that's going to be the future.
So we're about a month after Elon tweeted about the scandal, and there was that 2-week blip, as we mentioned. Has anything changed here? Are there any inquiries now? Is anything going on?
So Elon's pressure was extremely valuable because it did push the government, did create domestic pressure. It put the subject back in the newsline, in the headlines. That meant that the government had to make concessions. The concessions they've made are they're going to do a sort of rapid assessment, and they're going to do some local inquiries. But we're talking about a couple of local inquiries where...
Right. I mean, do you have faith that any of that will come to mean anything?
I don't think it means anything. We're talking about grooming gangs, rape gangs have been found in 50 different places in Britain, and they're talking about a handful of local inquiries. That's clearly insufficient. And even if they do go ahead, and even if they've got the best of intentions, they're not statutory inquiries. They have no power to compel anybody to come and give evidence. And that means that a lot of people simply won't. And there's no guarantee that they won't do what they've done in previous inquiries, which is deliberately make sure the inquiries are happening in faraway places where there's been no reports beforehand. And you can safely come back and say, well, we asked a couple of people and they said there wasn't a big problem, so no biggie. That is clearly not what's needed. At a minimum, we should be talking about a national inquiry. It should be independent. It should probably be headed up by someone foreign who's got no links to the British government to ensure that they don't have any level of coercion on them. And it should have statutory powers to go in everywhere. And if people don't want to speak to the inquiry, that should be enough for criminal charges. That should be enough for them to, go to jail.
Wasn't there also a bizarre connection between Keir Starmer's former job 10 years ago when they were looking into this and
the grooming gangs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was the director of public prosecutions at the time. And there've been various conspiracy theories about his time as DPP and the grooming gangs. He did do some reforms. They were good reforms. But if I was to sort of lay level of criticism, the criticism would be at the time he said, we failed these girls and we should never do that again. And the truth is that they've never gone back to it. Once the stuff was out of the headlines, they forgot about it. They moved on. And he's not shown any real interest in reopening that subject.
So what do you think a resolution to the immigration and cultural problems actually looks like? Let's say you're able to get your borders under control the way we have. There's still a homegrown issue of this. I mean, are we talking deportations? What does it actually look like, say, 5 years from now, if you had a serious government that was doing the proper things?
So first thing, like America, border control, you've got to do that. Second thing, you've got to slow the rate. You just simply can't handle the number of people that are coming in. I think there's no reason why you couldn't slash things to a very, very small amount. In fact, if you just took people who were earning sufficient money to actually really genuinely be net contributors to the country, you'd already be talking about a very small amount. So if you included them and spouses, and even with the spouses, you'd have a certain level to make sure they can support themselves, you'd already reduce immigration to a tiny amount.
And that seems doable. I mean, that's something
totally.
a country can still do, yeah.
Absolutely. You could if a government got in tomorrow and wanted to do it, they could go to the immigration rules, they could change those rules, it would go into force immediately, and you could slash immigration with basically zero negative economic impact immediately. Then you get to the second one, the harder question, which is what do you do with the people you've got here?
Yeah.
If they've committed criminal acts, you can and should deport them. That's been made very hard. Unfortunately, that's going to require us dealing with international law, because it's international law that hobbles us. There's been a huge, huge growth in that stuff, sort of post-1945. A lot of it gets instituted. It's got very universal utopian aims. And then it gets progressively taken over by lawyers and judges, and it expands. So in our case, one of the big problems is the European Convention on Human Rights. Not a bad thing when they instituted it, but it's grown. It now has a doctrine called the living instrument doctrine, which basically is we can reinterpret it. And the end result is that in many cases, you simply cannot deport people, criminals who've committed serious crimes, including rape gang members. We have never deported a single rape gang member. Never. And that's in well over a decade, or sort of maybe 15 years of these guys going on trial.
It's unimaginable, actually.
It's completely unimaginable. And I think that's where it will have to change. We'll have to, again, look at America and say, international law exists to help and protect human dignity. It shouldn't be hindering. It shouldn't be putting the rights of the rapists over the rights of the victims.
So one more question for you to connect this to the ARC conference. If this country is able to fix some of these things, what do you think a positive vision for this country looks like in, say, 5-10 years?
I think Britain has an incredibly positive future if the changes can be made. We have an incredibly smart population. We have a fantastic position just outside of Europe, between Europe and the United States. We have a wonderful natural position, a wonderful history, a wonderful set of laws, of institutions, of culture, of everything else. All that's needed to do is clear out the rubbish, clear out the regulations, clear out the nonsense that is in the way, and that can be done. And then Britain will be a rich, a prosperous, God willing, a safe country.
Good luck, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.
So, just to give you a sense for what's happened, this all began in 2020. In the last 5 years, hundreds of victims have come forward. Now there's lawsuits on behalf of nearly 300 victims and 25 lawsuits suing Pornhub, including class actions on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims. They've been criminally charged by the U.S. government. They've lost all credit card processing. Visa, MasterCard, and Discover cut them off. They actually had to take down 91% of the entire website. Had to be taken down in what Financial Times called probably the biggest takedown of content in internet history.
All right, so we are here at the ARC conference, and I've been talking to all sorts of political leaders and thinkers and philosophers and all of those types about the civilizational struggle that we're in. You come at it from a slightly different place, from really focusing on human trafficking and pornography, but that fits within this civilizational struggle that we're going through. So I guess first, how did you get involved in all of that? And then we'll
in the context, yeah, sure. In the context of now 18 years in the fight against sex trafficking, about 5 years ago, I was investigating the intersection between what I call the big porn industry and sex trafficking and child sexual abuse, and was paying attention to the headlines and heard some really horrific stories of child abuse that was taking place on Pornhub. It was being monetized and globally distributed, and specifically the case of a 15-year-old girl from Florida who was missing for an entire year, and she was finally found when her distraught mother was tipped off by a Pornhub user that he recognized her daughter on the site. And she was found in 58 videos being raped for profit on Pornhub. And so in the context of my work, I asked a question. How in the world was this happening? And it wasn't just that victim, it was numerous victims that we were hearing about. And it was a question of how did this happen? And I began to look at the big porn tube sites. These are the YouTubes of porn. I tested the upload system by, recording the rug and in my room and the keyboard and uploaded, and found out that they were not verifying age or consent. So anybody anywhere in the world could upload a sex video to Pornhub in under 10 minutes. Only an email address was required, no ID.
So literally no controls. So
No
a
controls.
15-year-old kid themselves could be uploading this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they were.
Now, I
They
assume
are.
that's against whatever their terms of service might be, but that doesn't stop anyone.
It was
from
just a
doing
show, right? It was the fine print terms of service, check a box here,
Yeah.
but it was a free-for-all. And that's how the site actually became infested with videos of real sexual crime. And I felt like we need to sound the alarm on this, because it was Pornhub, but it was also its sister sites that were owned by the same parent company. These are some of the most popular porn tube sites in the world are owned by this company: RedTube, GayTube, YouPorn, XTube, ExtremeTube, on and on and on. And these sites are infested with real sexual crime. And so we had to really sound the alarm on what was going on.
So as you guys uncover some of this stuff, what is the response from PornTube and the parent company as it relates to, putting aside what someone might feel about porn in general, which I would like to discuss with you, as it relates to child porn? I mean, I don't know any sane person that thinks that is okay. So
Right. Well, they were kind of deflecting. So as all this was coming to light, there was some traction, a lot of traction around, calling them out for what was happening. I was able to start a petition that started to go viral. We got, 2.3 million signatures from every country in the world. And as this was happening, victims were coming forward on a regular basis, and whistleblowers from inside the company were coming forward to reveal the inner workings of how this all happened. The media started to pay attention. Hundreds of articles began to be written about this, and their response, instead of to recognize that there was a serious problem, was to try to deflect, was try to do crazy PR stunts to try to take the attention away from what was actually going on. But we kept at it, and happy to say that we've made a lot of progress in holding them accountable for the mass distribution of sexual crime. So, just to give you a sense for what's happened, this all began in 2020. In the last 5 years, hundreds of victims have come forward. Now there's lawsuits on behalf of nearly 300 victims and 25 lawsuits suing Pornhub, including class actions on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims. They've been criminally charged by the U.S. government. They've lost all credit card processing. Visa, MasterCard, and Discover cut them off. They actually had to take down 91% of the entire website. Had to be taken down in what Financial Times called probably the biggest takedown of content in internet history.
Wow. So 91% of the content was underage?
It was unverified. So
Yeah.
they had no idea whether this was a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, whether it was rough sex or rape, whether it was consensually recorded and non-consensually uploaded. And what we understood was the site was actually infested with illegal content.
Right.
And so that is why they had to take down that much content. They went from 56 million pieces of content in 2020 to 5.2 million today.
Wow.
And we're not done yet because there's still unverified content on the site.
So that's going after the distributor in effect. But what about the people? Now, I assume some of it is just, in essence, kids uploading it themselves. And then there's obviously some legal issues there. I don't know if you go after parents or something like that. And then what about the people that are actually involved in trafficking and getting these kids involved in it?
Yes. So we believe in accountability. We need justice to be served in order to deter future abusers. And that includes those who are actually uploading the content. In this case, this is a free porn tube site. The ones that are actually profiting from and doing the most damage in this case with regard to distribution is the site itself. Because, at the time in 2020, they had 170 million visits per day. They had 56 billion visits that year. They had enough content uploaded every year. It would take 169 years to watch if you put those videos back to back. And so what victims say, it's one thing to be raped, right? But then that's filmed and then it's uploaded to the mainstream site on the surface web like Pornhub, where millions of people had an opportunity to download that content. So they had a download button on every single video, and to download that content, then to re-upload it again and again and again, where they understood the worst moment of their life would live in perpetuity online forever.
So this is going to sound naive or something, but who are they being raped by? Like, these are traffickers that are getting basically young kids in essence, and don't they think they're going to be caught? I mean,
Well, they could anonymously upload. So they could even use a VPN to upload. So at the time, like could be impossible to actually locate them. There was some who were uploading and they were even, verifying themselves as uploaders to monetize the content on Pornhub. So I'll give you an example. There was a man named Rocky Shea Franklin in Alabama, and he had drugged and overpowered a 12-year-old boy. And he filmed the assaults of this little boy, and he uploaded 23 of those videos to Pornhub with titles that actually indicated that this was abuse. Like, Uncle's Secret and Young Ass's Best. I mean, titles that would clearly show that this was abuse. And he verified himself. So he actually showed his ID, and they actually apprehended him, and he's in prison for 40 years for what he did. But Pornhub, that globally distributed, police actually went after Pornhub and demanded that they take those videos down, and they were ignored for 7 months while that boy's rape videos were downloaded and uploaded and got hundreds of thousands of views.
So how is it that Pornhub is still up at this point if they've done so much clearly illegal stuff? I mean, it doesn't sound like they're hiding it to that.
Well, the wheels of justice turn slowly. I mean, but they are turning, and thankfully, 91% of the site has been taken down, and they've faced serious repercussions. I mean, the CEO and the COO were forced to resign. The secret majority shareholder was exposed. They're personally being sued. That little boy that I just mentioned, he's now 18, and he's suing the company along with many other victims. And the company was actually sold as a distressed asset because of the repercussions of what's happened. But we're not done yet because we want to see justice fully served. And what that means is, justice to the full extent of the law, both criminally and civilly. And that's so important to be a deterrent to future abusers.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, for these corporate traffickers, is what I call them, it's a risk-benefit calculation for them. And we have to increase risk and then eliminate profitability. And when we do that, we're going to see a transformation of this industry to make the internet a safer place.
Do you see any of the controls that they're putting in as working? I'm in Florida, where now I think you have to have an ID to go on some of these sites. That at least provides some protection, I suppose, on the user end. That's not doing anything on the end that you're talking about. But I assume you find some value in some of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, children are being exploited in front of the screen, and they're being exploited behind the screen. And victims are being exploited on both sides for profit, because the business model of free user-generated porn is to sell ad impressions. So it's all about traffic. That's what they care about the most, is content and traffic.
Have you guys gone for the advertisers too?
They have no mainstream legitimate advertisers anymore. Nobody will, even KY Jelly is Astroglide will not advertise. I mean, they even had, at one point, they had Kraft Heinz Unilever advertising. They were called out. They stopped. So, they don't have legitimate mainstream advertisers anymore, thank goodness, because that's another repercussion of what's happened. They've lost mainstream business partners. But the business model relies on selling 4.6 billion ad impressions every single day on Pornhub. And that's why they need that traffic. But I think these controls are important because children have free access to the site too, right? Mm-hmm. Where their sex education as young as 8, 9, 10, 11 years old is not just violent, hardcore, legal pornography, but is actually crime scenes that they're witnessing from such a young age that's shaping their sexual template for life, which is really harmful. So the solution at scale for this issue is age and consent verification. So we need age verification for those who are accessing the site, just like, you said Florida has done, Texas has done. Currently, the Supreme Court is hearing and going to decide whether it's okay for states to implement age verification to protect children. Mm-hmm. But we also need age and consent verification for those who are in those user-generated porn videos as well. Right. And when that happens, then we're going to see this prevented on these sites.
What do you think of the argument? When the Florida thing happened, I read an article that I thought was an interesting philosophical point, that the verification should be done at the user end, meaning it should be done by the parents on the device rather than putting it on the site, because the site can only control that site. But if the parents were fully involved, and kids are smart and they can always get around things, I fully accept that. But if the parent were fully involved in paying attention to what's on the kid's phone or what access was there, that probably is really the only way to deal with it.
I don't agree with that's the only way. I say both and. when we think about safety, like when we're driving a car, right? We have a seatbelt, we have a roll bar, we have airbags, we have many different ways that we try to protect ourselves in that situation. I think the same thing could apply to protecting kids from porn exposure. I mean, that's one line of defense, but it doesn't work all the time. And I mean, there's a lot of children that don't have attentive parents that are able to watch them 24/7, that even could take the time to understand the technology for device level of verification of age. And again, kids are smart. They can get around that. So I think we need that, but we also need age verification at the site level, third-party age verification, because I would never want anybody to hand over an ID to a porn site like
Right.
Pornhub.
So that the article that I read was basically arguing that then, okay, congratulations, you've just handed them your ID.
Well, we have third party. So
Right.
I think that fear is based on a misconception about how this could actually happen and what technology we have available to safely, with respect to privacy, be able to verify age on a site like that. So we have third party companies. I mean, one of them is called Yoti. And in 1 second, they can do a biometric facial scan that doesn't even store the actual photo of a person, but uses pixels and numbers. And that technology is trained on thousands, if not millions, of other faces. And they can determine in 1 second with over 99% accuracy the age of a person that would be using the site. They can store that as a token, and that could be used on multiple adult sites. And so, we have ability like that to be able to age verify. And it's not a huge inconvenience for an adult to go through that in order to protect countless children from exposure to this kind of content.
So in your vision of a future that would, let's say, make sense through the lens that you're talking about this, you'd have the processes like you just described on both ends, meaning the user end and the corporate end, or whatever you want to call that. And then basically you're okay with pornography existing.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's when it's legal and it's consensual, really, truly consensual. For me, that's none of my business. My work is to protect children from access and to protect victims and children from being exploited in that content. In the United States, pornography, if it's done that way, is legal, right? And it's constitutionally protected. So, for me, that's none of my business. To each his own in that regard. But we need to, for sure, draw the red line, ensuring the best safeguards that we possibly can to ensure that children are not being exposed to this content.
Is the biggest hurdle you have to face that nobody wants to talk about this because it's kind of embarrassing and weird and sex is uncomfortable to talk about and everything else?
It's one of them. I mean, people are uncomfortable talking about porn and talking about rape and trafficking and child abuse and all of these things. And I think that does allow this to continue kind of hidden in the shadows. I mean, that's why Pornhub was purchased for $2,750 in 2007 is when it launched online. By 2020, it was the 5th most visited website in the world. And this entire time, victims were being exploited for profit. It was hidden in plain sight. And it wasn't until 2020 that this began to get attention and traction so that we can actually hold those responsible to account and help stop this in the future. And I think it's partly because of what you just said, is that people are scared to talk about it. I mean, the interesting thing is that it may feel like it's this quiet corner of the internet, but it's such a huge swath of it, right? And most people have been, exposed to it or consumers of it, but afraid to talk about it. A lot of people, even struggle with compulsive porn use that they don't want to talk about because they're embarrassed or there's shame involved with that as well. And that's a huge problem, especially for, young people who are growing up on exposure to pornography. And so, yeah, I think it's a huge issue in society, but it's definitely not talked about enough. And we need to kind of break those barriers and just be able to discuss this because it's really affecting so many lives.
Let me ask you one other thing, and then we'll finish this up on the main stage. So I don't want to ask you everything right now. But do you see a difference in attitudes as it relates to some of these controls when it comes to America versus Europe?
Interesting. I mean, there's a movement. I feel like there's a movement now that it's not just in the United States, but we've seen it in Canada and the UK, and I've seen it across Europe for specifically protecting kids from accessing this content. Unfortunately, I haven't also seen the same passion for implementing the controls we need for those who are in the videos. I don't think people quite understand the dangers of user-generated pornographic content where these sites are getting infested with illegal content. But I think we'll get there. But at least it's a start. I see a huge, 17 states in the United States have implemented age verification for users. We're seeing that push in the UK. We're seeing it in Germany, in France, in Canada. So I think that there's this kind of global movement to understand the harms and try to protect against it.
We will continue this on the main stage shortly.
If you're looking for an unfiltered lens into the world of tomorrow, go check out our tech playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.
It got to the point where our institutions have got so paralyzed and corrupt and captured that we really do have to think of alternative ways. I mean, David Brooks this morning, bless him, was trying to say, the MAGA movement, Trump, they're not conservatives because they want to tear down the institutions, and conservatives should want to conserve the institutions. That's not what conservatives want to conserve. Conservatives want to conserve timeless principles.
Right, the valuable things.
Exactly, and institutions are the vehicles and the instruments for implementing those timeless values. And if those institutions have shown themselves, however long they've been around, however noble they may seem to be, but if they've shown themselves to be completely incapable of implementing those values, quite the reverse, eroding them, then the conservative position is to pull them down.
All right, James Orr, I'm doing a ton of interviews while I'm here at ARC. You're the only person that I'm actually going to read the bio for. Some of them were just putting some information beneath their name, but you got a lot of stuff here, so let's just do it. James Orr is the Associate Professor of Philosophy of Religion at the University of Cambridge, Chair of the Edmund Burke Foundation UK, and Director of UK Programs for Trinity Forum Europe. That kind of sums up what this whole ARC conference is about, doesn't it?
It does.
Little political, little philosophical, little religious, little of everything.
Yeah, I think so. And that kind of delicate tango between the institutional and the networked, and how we think about, was it one of the speakers on the first day was invoking Neil Ferguson's metonymy, that distinction between the square and the tower. And it's such a brilliant image, that. And I think, yes, the power of networks, what networks can do, but they can't be without institutions. So networks need an anchoring unit, I suppose, in institutions. But yeah, I think you're right. This gathering does testify to the strength of networks, and all the kind of superpowers that networks have, particularly networks of relative kind of minorities, high levels of trust. They can adapt very quickly. They grow geometrically as opposed to institutions which grow in a more linear way. They accommodate disagreement better on the whole. If there is real disagreement, then breaking off a node of the network isn't such a catastrophe as a big institutional split that can paralyze an institution and its functions. They're harder to capture, much harder to capture, because they're made up of people rather than, big buildings or big foundations or whatever. And I think crucially, they're invisible to the naked eye. This is why historians have actually, until Neil, have been so bad at picking them up, because you've got to go through complex correspondence relationships, and this guy went to this school with this guy, and went drinking with this guy. They're harder to spot, and so harder to take down, harder to target. And so I think what's great about ARC is that it understands all those advantages. It's not deliberately trying to just say, let's tear down all the institutions. It's trying to renew the institutions. But we've got to the point where our institutions have got so paralyzed and corrupt and captured that we really do have to think of alternative ways. I mean, David Brooks this morning, bless him, was trying to say, the MAGA movement, Trump, they're not conservatives because they want to tear down the institutions, and conservatives should want to conserve the institutions. That's not what conservatives want to conserve. Conservatives want to conserve timeless principles.
Right, the valuable things.
Exactly, and institutions are the vehicles and the instruments for implementing those timeless values. And if those institutions have shown themselves, however long they've been around, however noble they may seem to be, but if they've shown themselves to be completely incapable of implementing those values, quite the reverse, eroding them, then the conservative position is to pull them down.
So I wasn't in the main room when David Brooks was speaking, so I didn't hear that line, although it doesn't surprise me from David Brooks. But even that, him being up there and saying that, which is clearly counter to, I think, what most people here believe, that sort of shows the strength of ARC in the first place.
I think that's absolutely right. I was doing an interview with Times Radio last night. I don't know really why I agree, but they were trying to just frame it. It's just this sense far right.
I did too with them. They did the same thing with me.
Well, I never learned. I never learned.
Yeah.
But, one of the points I made, I said, look, we would love to have more left-leaning people along, but they just don't accept the invitation. And I think it was important to have a figure like David Brooks there, because first of all, it shows that we're not frightened of the other side. We're not frightened of critiques of our own position. We're willing to be open to intellectual diversity, if you want to use the D word in this context, if it's not been so diseased already, because it shows generosity, it shows a breadth, and it shows the kind of openness that is essential for any kind of free inquiry. Imagine the equivalent on the left, right? You're not going to get they're much, much less open to conservative speakers going along and pricking their bubbles. You're not going to get...
They're much less willing to have liberal speakers speak.
Precisely.
Forget conservatives.
Absolutely right. And so I would have thought we've got a big coalition here, ranging from classical liberals right up to conservatives, and I like actually plenty of more reactionary types as well. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you call them. They're not conservative in as much as they want to tear a lot of stuff down, but for the reasons I was explaining earlier, that may be the most authentic conservative position in some situations.
Yeah. Is that the strange tension that might exist in the subset here? That do you go in and reform these things? If we were to look at a list of 100 institutions, is it maybe that 70 need to be reformed, 30 need to be burned? Could reverse those numbers? That probably is like the most granular question being asked, or the most literal question.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, one of the points that David Brooks made or tried to make was that, he visited Africa and he'd seen all the good that American dollars had done with the AIDS crisis there. And now, Trump was tearing all of that up. Now, look, okay, maybe that's valid criticism. I don't think it is. Why? Because I think if you go in and if you got a sort of a system that is so corrupt and diseased, part of the problem with that system, as I understand it, USAID, is that it was doing good things, like the work in Africa, no doubt, in the 80s and 90s and so on. But that in a way, it was a bad thing because it was masking the terrible stuff, the terrible waste and abuse and fraud on the American taxpayer that it was, as it were, permitting for decades. So I think the idea is, rather than just pull the plaster off just a little bit, just rip the whole thing off, just tear the whole thing down. And yes, start again, but slowly, and work out a system that is more transparent and is better equipped. If you've got to the point where an institution has shown itself to be just completely unsuited for its purposes and for its founding aims and ideals, just burn it down, salt the earth, and work out how you build things up again.
Have you seen any important institutions that have not been infected by this woke thing? I mean, even I'm doing an Oxford debate in a couple of days. Oxford or Cambridge, or you mentioned to me right before we started, Jordan Peterson had been invited. We were on tour when he got the invite. I had never seen him so happy to be a visiting fellow it was at the Divinity School,
I think, right?
Divinity
in Cambridge.
Yeah. And he got invited. Then there was backlash and they disinvited him. Eventually, I think you mentioned about a year and a half later, that got reversed. Yeah. But the point is, all of these institutions, the things that we thought would never be touched, it seems to me have been touched.
It's a great question. I think in the UK context, a quick answer to that would be to say there are almost no institutions that have been completely untouched by this cultural revolution. One plea I would make in defense of Oxford and Cambridge is that the rot has spread more slowly, first in other UK universities, and certainly more slowly than seems to be the case with the Ivy League. One of our advantages in Oxford and Cambridge is that we're a lot poorer than, Harvard seems to be basically a hedge fund with a university.
Yeah, exactly.
We are not, and what that means is the leadership tends to be more sensitive to legal liability and reputational risk. The other interesting feature of a unique feature of the architecture of power in Oxford and Cambridge is that they are medieval universities. So unlike in America and in Germany, where you've got these basically campus-based universities, Oxford and Cambridge is really a basket of quasi-autonomous colleges that really have a lot of power and really run their own thing. The university slowly emerged as a kind of supranational body that could call the shots to some extent, but really the power is still with the colleges. Why is that important? Well, it's important because it shows that in any intellectual culture or any culture at all that values true diversity, freedom, it's important for there to be those sort of poles of disagreement. I think of the United States and as sort of a big very big national version of that, as it were. You've got lots and lots of different states that can experiment in different ways, and that's it's a sort of sifting mechanism, and it helps you work out what's right and what's working. So Oxford and Cambridge they're much harder to capture, in other words, because you've got to go through each college. Now, things are not great. I would just stand by your initial diagnosis is absolutely true. But we've had some successes. Actually, the Jordan affair, with his cancellation in 2019 and then it's coming back in 2021, was one of, I think, a catalytic factor in the government, the Tory government, who's just been elected, but been voted out, pushing through a piece of legislation on academic freedom, which, as far as I know, is the first attempt in the West to address this crisis within the universities. Now, the new regime has been trying to slow it down and torpedo it and destroy it, but it looks as if it's going to stay in some form. And that's encouraging. I mean, no conservative wants the state to be intruding on the intellectual culture of the university. But again, it is a conservative position for the state to act when it should act in order to ensure that institutions are recalled to their founding ideals. And that was an interesting example of that. It was a big debate on the right here in the UK. Do we really want to do this? And it was an interesting moment in the emergence of a kind of British new right that the victory went to those who said, we can't just be small state conservatives anymore. If we're going to confront these problems, we've got to learn how to wield power when we've got it.
Right. So, and that really would be the difference between a conservative and a libertarian in some sense. And that's what the right seems to be grappling with right now. Do we ever protect anything, even when we have to unfortunately use the government? The reactionary right, and again, you mentioned some of them are represented here, they're all for that. The more libertarian right or the conservatives, the liberals maybe don't want to do it as much, but this is what conservatism, wide tent conservatism is grappling with.
That's I couldn't have put it better myself. That's exactly right. I mean, Hamilton talks a lot about, the importance of a muscular government. It doesn't mean a big government. Actually, it may be the case, right, as I think we're beginning to see in the United States, that a smarter and more effective government is in fact a smaller government. Yeah. That doesn't mean it's a less powerful government or a government that's not, as it were, making sure that everything is running right. You want an efficient government if you're going to have a smart and effective government. And that will probably mean a smaller government than the governments that we've got at the moment.
Let me ask you one other thing, which is I've asked everybody the same exact question. I've gotten fairly similar answers, I would say. We're clearly hopeful in America right now. And I think most of you guys are looking at us across the pond and going, boy, there is a lot of hope for America. And maybe some of that can translate here. Do you think it can translate here?
I do. And in fact, I know that it can because we're feeling it already. A lot of the conversations that I've been having at ARC, a lot of the speeches I've been hearing at ARC, you can feel that kind of infectious enthusiasm coming from across the pond. I mean, a year ago, I would be lamenting with my right-wing British friends, isn't it just so depressing that we're now just loyal colonials of the 51st state, just wondering what Sleepy Joe is going to do next, But now I'm thinking, gosh, vassalage, I think we could live with this. We'll be happy to take our orders from the imperial metropole. But no, seriously, what's happening over there, it's shifting the parameters of the politically possible. Things are happening. No one, you could not, in our election in July last year, in July 2024, you could not be talking about cuts to the civil service. You could not be talking about waste and abuse. You could not be talking, it was all about fiscal headroom. How do we get more taxes? I think that debate is going to change forever just on that one issue. And there will be many others too, where I think we're going to be taking our cues from our American cousins. And that's kind of appropriate. We taught you all, and we're now it's only right that we enjoy the benefits 300 years later.
We're happy to help.
Good to be with you, Jay.
If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.
But certainly, in the recent 2 or 3 years, we've seen a massive influx of people. We think there are almost as many as 2 million new immigrants, which on a population of 27 million is a significant chunk, which has been a policy of this Labor government, including recently allowing the widows or brides from ISIS to return to Australia, which is a very, very dangerous and controversial thing to be doing, of course.
All right, Senator Alex Antic, a pleasure to meet you. I feel like I already interviewed you. We did a half hour where we should have just had the cameras rolling, but we're going to sit down and repeat a bunch of things that I think we just spoke about. But first I should mention, so we're here in Melbourne. How was my pronunciation there?
That was good.
That was pretty good.
It was excellent.
Can you say it? Because I'm nervous for my live show tomorrow.
Melbourne is good. Melbourne, but just don't say Sydney.
Definitely don't say Sydney. I should mention you are not Senator of Melbourne.
Correct.
You are Senator of Adelaide. Can you break down? I thought we'd do a little Australia 101 for the people, because even me coming in, it's a big country. We know Crocodile Dundee. We know Bluey. That's kind of the extent.
And spiders, I'm told, as well.
Yeah,
Everyone's frightened of Australian spiders, and you should be.
Yeah.
Well, look, and look, this is going to test me as well, because my knowledge of Australian history and politics might not be. But essentially, that's right. Look, I'm a senator. Similar system to the US, but we sit in two chambers of the Parliament, Senate and the lower house, as we call it, the House of Representatives. Senators are elected by their whole state, whereas a little bit like in the US, the lower house is just elected in districts. If you like. We call them electoral districts. Each state has 12 except for our territories. And it's a house of review. We review laws and make it sound quite boring.
No, politics 101. No, we have similar systems. We have similar people also. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about what you think it means to be Australian, because that seems to be a debate in all Western countries right now. So we'll get to that in a sec. But why don't we first talk a little bit about just sort of what do you think the state of the country is at a moment, before we get to the people specifically? What's the state of Australia?
Well, I think this is a very different country than the one I grew up in. I grew up in the 80s and to a certain extent the 90s as well. The world's very different. The West is very different now than it was then, but Australia in particular is. We have, I suppose, you would say we are the land of opportunity in many respects, resources, natural resources, beautiful beaches. And yet, for some reason, there is this cloud hanging over this country at the moment, and I think it's across the board. I think it's all the way through the country. There is a feeling of pessimism a little bit, and that has changed over the years. I think we've seen that more and more over the last 10 years. COVID, of course, has had a long-lasting impact on the country. I think that in many respects, the country hasn't recovered from COVID. A lot of economic problems, a lot of businesses just never reopened after lockdowns, particularly in this state.
Yeah.
So it is an interesting question. Historically, Australians are very laid-back people. As you said, the idea of Steve Irwin and Crocodile Dundee, that is, and to some extent is, but certainly was, what Australians were like when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And, they still exist, but we are seeing an urbanisation of the population, which has changed that a little bit. And I think people are perhaps a little more reserved with their behaviour.
So how much of that unease that you're talking about is a COVID hangover? Because one of the most shocking things, I lived in Los Angeles during COVID, which was as dystopian as you could get, except for the city we are in right now. We saw videos out of Melbourne that looked like they were coming out of China.
Yeah.
So how much of what's going on in this country right now is that people kind of had it good, great landmass, as you said, laid back population, beautiful, everyone looks great here, have this weird authoritarian thing happen, and now the years out of that seem to be what's going on?
Well, I guess it depends.
From an outsider, that's kind of the way I'm seeing it.
And Americans saw that, and they saw the images, and we were very conscious of that at the time. And I think it was very important that they did, because to me, it reflected some of the things that we don't have in this country that you do in the United States, things like the First Amendment. And so we went through this period during COVID where things were pretty bleak, pretty tough. And for me, that was a very strong wake-up call. That was 12 months into this job, into my parliamentary career. And for me, it showed the very frail nature of Western democracies, Western liberalism, if you like, because with the swipe of a pen, parliaments all over the country simply handed off huge blocks of power to our public service, to our bureaucrats, who started making decisions for us. So many of the decisions you saw, such as the lockdowns that the city was put into, came at the behest of public servants rather than politicians, which was a very unusual scenario and almost a little unique to Australia in the way in which the country is made up of states in a federation.
Right. So basically the kind of managerial class.
Very much.
You mentioned to me when we sat down a moment ago that you were put in a quarantine for 2 weeks.
I was coming back from seems incredible now, but at the time I was coming back from Parliament. And the rules in my home state there were that you needed to get it's hard to say out loud, but you needed to get a visa, almost like a pass to come home to your own state, which I put in. I gave them all the information and they said, you can't come. And I said, all right, well, I'm coming. And before I knew it, they said, well, you come back, but you have to do 2 weeks in a hotel not dissimilar to this. Now, that hotel had a big metal fence around it, the middle of the city. It had police downstairs. I wasn't allowed to leave the hotel room, and having tested 6 times negative for COVID.
Unbelievable.
I was put into an area where there was actually COVID. I can remember vividly. So the most, it was a sort of a parody in a sense, but I can remember vividly going. They would serve you meals, and on the first day, I had a knock on the door, boom, like that, and I sort of woke up and went to the door immediately, and then I got a phone call from downstairs. It was constable, police sergeant, something. You got up and got your meal too quickly. The person hadn't cleared the room. Okay, so next time I waited 2 minutes, and I got a phone call saying you need to go and collect your meal. It's been left out there, and that's not within the rules. So, this was an extraordinarily authoritarian approach to the problem. And I back to the original question, I do think that's left a mark on Australians. I think for many of us, it now feels as though the things that we never thought were possible in the country are possible.
So before we get to who is an Australian, what does it mean to be Australian? I have one other question for you first, which is, so you are a member of the Liberal Party here.
Yeah.
And as we discussed earlier, the word liberal from an American perspective has been completely mucked up because now the people who proclaim to be liberals are the least liberal people, actually. So anytime I go to another country and someone says they're a liberal, I go, well, do they mean they're a liberal like for individual rights and laissez-faire economics and logic and reason? Or do they mean liberal like I'm sort of a progressive authoritarian? I think I know your answer to that, but can you explain a little bit what does it mean to be part of the Liberal Party in Australia?
Well, I'm just waiting for someone to agree to being called, authoritarian. Somebody else.
Right.
I am actually. That'll be a one for the ages.
Yeah.
But look, no, it is. It's a strange use of term. I mean, I think we would look at it, the Liberal Party in the sort of spirit of Mill, classical liberalism.
Yeah.
And that's the way the party was formed. It was really formed as a sort of conglomerate of centre-right parties that had a conservative and a libertarian angle bent, if you like, and they came together after the war, and that was the modern Liberal Party. Quite different. We actually wear the colour blue as the logo as well, so it's quite you would be well understood for being mistaken for coming to Australia, seeing blue and Liberal and thinking you're dealing with basically the centre left.
Right.
But that is not the case. So, no, in Australia, that's what it means. It's interesting, though, in the sense that politics in Australia doesn't quite overlay into the United States, probably the same in Europe as well. Our politics tends to be probably a little more to the centre on both sides, I think. Our far left is probably a little closer to the centre, and the same with the...
So your far left is what party now?
Well, we would say the Australian Greens, who are our furthest left party. I mean, there are others. Of course, there are minor parties that are always on the ballot, as there are in every country. But in terms of parliamentary representation, the Greens they're an environmentalist party that has really drifted into, sort of far left doctrine of, I would say, angles that involve, all sorts of things that aren't related to the environment.
Immigration.
All of that,
yeah.
So they are certainly, and we do have further right parties than the Liberal Party. We've got a party called One Nation, which is a minor party that deals in sort of nationalist issues, if you like. So there's a broad spectrum. I know that's the case in Europe as well. It's not quite as binary as it is in the US, but if you were overlaying, people would disagree with this, but the Liberal Party is probably closest to the Republican Party, I'd say.
Right, which is funny. That's the point. In America, we basically now have a Republican Party that is pretty much filled with all ex-libs, and we have a Democrat Party that's now filled with what I would say are largely kind of crazy people, but we can leave that there. So let me ask you, what does it mean now to be Australian? Because even being here just for a day and wandering around, it's a little hard to tell in a sense. The bluey, the bluey sort of Steve Irwin thing maybe is not the perfect encapsulation?
It's a very difficult question to ask because I think it depends where you're going and where you are. In the city, and I mean, if I went back to when I was growing up, I think that the demographic in the city was largely the same as in the country areas. That's not the case anymore. My feeling is that really to get a feel for for what is an Australian, you almost need to get out to the country areas, the regional areas where a lot of what we consider to be Australian is still alive and well. People fly the flag out there. You know, if you come to Australia is one of the very few countries that still, I think, finds it acceptable to have 3 different flags on a government building. You know, I notice in the United States, despite even in places like California, where you might see the California flag, you'll still always see the American flag. But here, you will see a myriad of, Australian, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a problem with any of those flags, but there is one flag for the country. In the country, you'll see very much the opposite. You'll just see the Australian flag. Now, these days, the person living, the urbanised Australian is quite different, I think. They do tend to lean further to the left, and they are a mix. They're very multicultural and quite different. In the country, I think the Steve Irwin character still exists, and I think they're very real. But overall, the Australian nature is laid back. We are, very outdoors loving people. We're very laid back. People, I think, here are very forgiving as well. The other thing that makes Australians quite unique is they're very apolitical. So, there just isn't the interest in politics. In fact, I was having a conversation on the plane with some young people who had just no grasp of it, and that's fine. But that is a very, we're not quite as engaged in the political process as
right, which in some sense probably led to a lot of what happened during COVID because
I think
people were kind of checked out.
I think it did. Yeah, I think it did, and it doesn't take much for that authoritarian nature to creep out unless, I think Ronald Reagan said it's freedom's only a generation away from being lost, or words to that effect. So, we do have that constraint here in Australia. And I think people, it would be good to see people more conscious of their freedoms and what's being lost at the moment. I think it's being lost across the entire spectrum of the Australian nation at the moment.
So speaking of that, where is Australia as it pertains to immigration right now? Because you guys are a freaking giant landmass that it is its own continent. Most people don't realize that. You have you're an island. You're a very large island. You have no borders with anyone else. It seems like this place should be a fortress, which in some sense it was kind of set up to be.
Yep.
And yet it seems like there's also a lot of problems on the immigration.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's been historically, it's quite interesting, backlog of how the Australia came to be where it is. It's probably too long for today's conversation, but essentially we were settled by the English and the Irish and the Scottish out of Europe. And that continued really largely until around about the 60s or 70s when we started seeing, our post-war too, of course, before we started seeing influxes from Europe. There was, in fact, a white Australia policy for a long period of time. And that all changed in the latter half of the 20th century when we started seeing more immigration from Asia, and now in recent times from the Middle East and so on. But you're quite right. I mean, we had a population when I was growing up of around about just under 20 million. It's about 28 or thereabouts now, depending on where you look.
In a country that's the size of the United States,
it's pretty close.
350 million.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Now, the difference with Australia is most of our arable land is on the coasts.
Right.
So there's a lot of landmass in the middle where there's minerals and a bit of farming, but not a huge amount else, although they'd probably scream at me for that, but that is the fact. So most of it, most of the population is centred in those urban areas. So it's sort of a little bit misleading in the sense that we do have a large mass. The thing we do have is resources. We have plenty of water up north. We've got minerals everywhere. We've got some of the largest stockpiles of uranium and coal and iron and gas. We just don't use them because we are under the thumb of this green ideology, which is telling us to sort of self-harm by not using it and not burning it and so forth. But certainly, in the recent 2 or 3 years, we've seen a massive influx of people. We think there are almost as many as 2 million new immigrants, which on a population of 27 million is a significant chunk, which has been a policy of this Labor government, including recently allowing the widows or brides from ISIS to return to Australia, which is a very, very dangerous and controversial thing to be doing, of course. And so the dynamics change.
What is their argument in a place that has this many resources, that is this big? What is the argument? So we're going to bring in 10% of the population in 2 years, or
well, the argument that would be used is that COVID almost a moratorium on immigration, and we need to catch up. So that's the argument. And the argument is also always about skilled labour, and we don't have the expertise in certain areas. The truth of the matter is that I think people are just coming in and working, normal jobs. And of course, the net effect of that, in many respects, has been a press on housing, a press on living standards. And there are stories in Australia now of people, places like Sydney and Melbourne, lining up with 200 people for a single, bedroom apartment. So the effect on the cost of living and the lifestyle in Australia has been quite dramatic in a short amount of time. We're all very worried about that. I'm very worried about it. And of course, this country was built on immigration. So this is, as they say, not about hating the player. It's about the game. The numbers are extraordinary at the moment. The United States had this same problem. It was illegal immigration. This is legal immigration, but the effects are the same. And you have to be in control of your borders in a country like this. And I'm very worried about where we're headed.
Where does the kind of guilt about the Aboriginal population fit into this? We obviously have a version, every Western nation in some sense has a version of it. We have a version of it in the United States.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. I saw a clip this week on social media of a journalist from our ABC going around and talking to people in the 50s and 60s about whether Aboriginal children should swim in a swimming pool with white children. Now, if you believe the left, they would say that we were a country based on racism and have always been. This is black and white footage. These people, though, responded by saying, of course they should. Why wouldn't they? They're our brothers and sisters and so on and so forth. So this construct that Australia is a racist nation has been brewing for a long period of time. It's in overdrive at the moment. I think we're the least racist nation in the world, actually. I think Australians, as I said, with that laid-back nature, are very, very warm and welcoming. But the left have found a way to achieve their goals. The classic example is the Voice to Parliament referendum, which we had. Now, referendum in Australia is a serious thing. It's changing our constitution. I know it happens in the US too with amendments and so forth. But a couple of years ago, the government proposed enshrining an Aboriginal voice in Parliament, which would be a sort of effectively, they would have argued, but effectively a third chamber of our government.
Right.
The Australian people shot it down. Something like 65% voted no, depending on where you go. But the rationale that was used was this rationale of guilt. You've stepped on these people for years. You need to give them a voice. Of course, it was never true. And in fact, many Aboriginal people and groups, including my friend Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, who was a leading voice against it, is Aboriginal herself and spoke against it because it's the very essence of division, effectively, giving certain people certain rights and certain categories. So we've had to fight with a lot of that. And I think Australians are waking up to it. But that ethos is alive and well in the left, and they want to push that division.
How much of this also is now that there's an integration problem for the second generation of people that have come here? I was reading even this morning about this machete ban that just was instituted in the last 6 months or so here. And it sounds like most of the violence is not from illegals. Yeah. It's from second generation immigrants, meaning like 15-year-olds whose parents came here and feel different somehow or other.
Yeah. Look, I think that's always been a bit of a problem. When I was growing up, there were complaints about, knife use from, second generation immigrants from Southeast Asia. So I think it has always been an issue. But certainly I think this is one of the real world effects of this problem is people do take time to accustom. They do acclimatise and become accustomed to their new environments. And many are coming from very dangerous places like, some of the war-torn parts of Africa. So, it's a very difficult balance to mix, particularly when you throw such large numbers at a community that's not necessarily geared up for that. And as I said, Australia is a sort of a deceptively small country in a very large landmass, and I think we're starting to see that play out.
Where does the Islamist part of this fall into place? Because when I tweeted out first that I was coming here, a lot of people said, Dave, you're going to have to watch out, especially, well, they mostly told me about this city, actually.
Yeah. Look, there certainly has been a wave of crime. The machete ban is one of them. Look, I don't know whether it could honestly be attributed to any one group or other. I wouldn't say that it could be, honestly, but But, I mean, this is the nature of taking people from different parts of the world. I mean, sometimes cultures don't always mix, and we have to be careful of that. We really do. But look, Melbourne is going through its own problems. It's got a very left-leaning government, has had for a very long period of time. And, if you look around, I mean, it's a sort of a city that looks like it's in trouble, honestly.
It's funny because I was expecting that, and I've only been in these few blocks. We happen to be in a particularly nice area, and so far I haven't seen the trouble part. But everyone keeps telling me about it, so I believe it's there. I just haven't seen it.
I think it's all relative as well. I mean, there'll be parts of the US and parts.
Right, I go to blue cities in the US.
You'll be well acclimatized to it, I'm sure. But we're just not used to it. It's always been a very trouble-free country. And I think that's been part of the problem is we have thought that our institutions will always serve us well. We've always thought that there will never be trouble in this country and that we don't have this sort of social cohesion problem because we haven't. We've had people that have mixed. We had Greeks, Italians, and people from other parts of Europe that came here after the war and would have been lumbered with many of the same problems and arguments, but have assimilated well after a generation or two. So we're just not used to it. And that's just a feature of having large numbers coming in at one time, I would say.
So you guys have a Labour majority government right now. I'm not sure when we're airing this interview, but I believe on this coming Monday, your prime minister is going to be meeting with Donald Trump in the States. What would you like Donald Trump to say to him?
Oh, well, I mean, look, well, what we need actually is to keep the partnership going. I mean, ultimately, that's really what we need. I mean, we think we are an island away from everything, but we have neighbours that are not necessarily friendly all the time. So I think the most important thing is that we keep that going. We have there's this long-running debate in Australia about AUKUS, which is an alliance between the UK and Australia, and military equipment and submarines in particular, which Australia is looking to buy. So look, I hope that all goes well because we do need it. What's been interesting though is that Australia has historically, for reasons of the past, had a connection to the United Kingdom. That all sort of changed swung to the US after Vietnam, when the United States became our main ally, perhaps, and certainly in terms of military equipment and transfer, that was the main thing. We're seeing a little bit of a swing with this Labor government away from the Trump administration, I think now back towards the sort of the European elites who have perhaps more in common politically. So
I assume you're not happy with that.
I'm not happy with that at all. No, I don't. I think, I'm a very strong believer in the US-Australian alliance, and I think we need it. And, and I hope that continues. But I would say that's a challenge at the moment because I think the Trump administration, as they unashamedly are very America first and want to know what we can do for them as much as anything else. So let's hope that continues. But we just hope for poor old Albo the lights don't get switched off, because when the lights go off in the White House, you're in trouble.
You're in a lot of trouble, and Trump is not above shutting the lights off.
He is not above it at all.
What else should we know about this country that we don't know? I mean, we've talked mostly about problems actually, but it is an incredible country.
It's an incredible country.
I mentioned to you that I was supposed to come back from my first book tour, which was going to be the only international stops we were doing because I so fell in love with it when I was here in 2018. So I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah.
So give me some of the positives.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, how long have you got? We'll probably take the rest of the week to tell him. But honestly, I mean, it is a great part of the world down here. You're close to Asia, so there's all of that other side of it. But certainly inside our boundaries. I mean, you can't go past the beaches. Not so much in Melbourne. It's a bit cloudy. In fact, we should be all right. But other parts of the country, you've got tropical Queensland. You've got Sydney, which has the most incredible beaches. So do Perth, some of the best metropolitan beaches you'll find anywhere in the world. In South Australia, where I'm from, it's the wine regions. It's actually like going to Europe without being in Europe.
Yeah,
and
I had a great Australian Shiraz last night.
Yeah, and they're all there, and it's great. And look, I think the most impressive thing about this country, though, is the laid back manner. We have, it is a little bit like a theme park. We have thought that the world is as friendly and as generous as Australians are. Every time we travel, you see Aussies when they travel, I think sometimes get themselves into trouble because they just think the world operates like it does when you go down the road here. And of course, it's a big bad world out there. So, but in terms of a friendly place to come, and they love Americans too. They'll tell you they don't, but they do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of affinity with American.
Why do they tell you they don't?
Because Aussies
cool,
like to be Aussies like to be their own thing, but they'll say all sorts of things, but of course the friendship is real, and they love hearing about America, and they love the connection to America. So Americans are very, very welcome in Australia, I have to say. So it's a good thing. But the other thing I'd say is that you just can't be frightened of the wildlife here. There are no, we haven't seen a single anything in the middle of Melbourne.
Although we are in the city right now.
It has happened. There are times when Americans think it's nonsense, but there are times when kangaroos, probably not here, but certainly in Adelaide, I have seen it. In very, very built up areas, you will see a kangaroo coming through.
So when I take my guys in Sydney, we're going to go to that big kangaroo preserve, and the koalas have.
You'll see them.
What else do I have to warn them about over there?
Almost everything. I just wouldn't touch or get near anything.
Yeah.
And there are some big animals around. You go up north, and those crocodiles are serious.
No.
Which made Steve Irwin all the more incredible that he was happy to.
We're from Florida. We got a lot of gators.
A lot of gators. Ours are bigger.
Spider situation. I mean,
spiders are out of control. We're getting them all the time. My wife has found 2 at home, and I did remind her this morning that we live in Australia. So, you're not getting away from the spiders here, but there are some really nasty ones. Anything with red or white on them, just step around.
Just step away. Does this qualify as Australia 101?
This is Australia 101.
Is there anything else that we should
covered
do?
Pretty much all of it, but what else can we cover? Nothing. I think we've covered it all.
You can only give Americans so much at once. I feel like this was
a little bit of a download.
It was a pleasure, Alex. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. All right, everybody, this is the Rubin Report. I'm Dave Rubin. It's March 27th, 2025. We are live streaming on Rumble, on YouTube, on Locals. I know you've tapped that notification bell, so I don't even need to finish this. Yeah, you got it. We got a Rubin Report Locals community Q&A. We did not have a post-game show yesterday because I was on Piers Morgan immediately after the show, and we can't have a post-game show today because I got to get over to New York because I'm on the #1 show in late night, Greg Gutfeld, or Gutfeld with an exclamation point, tonight and tomorrow's show because I'm on Jesse Waters and I think Fox and Friends and a whole bunch of other media stuff in New York. Tomorrow's 11 a.m. show should be the highlights of Gutfeld. Thank you for bearing with us. I promise you some good laughs. I can already guarantee it in advance. I'm going to poke and noodle that little Greg Gutfeld guy. So we got a couple stories of the week that are we're not doing hardcore politics today. It's going to be a little bit of stuff from overseas. And then is there going to be a Islamic mega city in Texas? We'll find out. That's what we're doing on the Rubin Report today. All right, so we showed you the video last week of Conor McGregor, current MMA legend, former MMA fighter, at the White House, really making the case for Ireland being for the Irish. I know that that's very controversial, a pot of gold, a leprechaun, a rainbow, a Guinness, that sort of thing. Not necessarily a place that should just be overrun with immigrants from the Middle East and from Africa. It's really not controversial to say that. There's nothing wrong with fair-skinned white people. How you doing, Connor? Good to see you, as always. Check this out from Inevitable West. Breaking: Ireland's Director of Public Prosecutions is now considering charging Conor McGregor with incitement for hatred for posts he made on X back in 2023. He could face up to 2 years in prison. This is Trump-style legal warfare and blatant election interference. So we've been through all of this, guys. We've been through this many, many times here in the United States with Donald Trump. And now it appears that it's happening to Conor McGregor in Ireland. These are posts that he put up years ago. Clearly, nobody was looking into these posts until he shows up at the White House. Kind of implies he's going to announce a run for president, then announces it, I think the next day, maybe 2 days later. Conor McGregor tweeted this. I'll even try to do it in an Irish accent. "Fact! For the people of Ireland, I stand my ground. May our truth never be silenced. The fact is, if there is 7 years of zero resistance inside Oris un Torran, towards government, Ireland is done for. Magnify where we are right now, times 7,000. I would prefer to sail my yachts than have to approach the soulless, colourless combines of Dale Ireland every day. But if I do not, I am well aware of Ireland's fate, and I will never let that happen. Vote McGregor, the future of our country depends on it. Where's me freaking shillelagh? No, it was a little Scottish. Kind of worked. Yeah. So people are all focused on this now, and they're going, well, what the hell is happening in Ireland? Like, it's interesting. If you think of all the different countries in the world, okay, Spain is for Spanish people, Britain's for British people. And we know that these things have largely changed. And how do you define what your country is and what your culture is and all of that? There's something about Ireland. You think of the rolling greens and the golf courses and the beer and the leprechauns. Like, it seems pretty straightforward. There's a country for Irish people. Not to say black people can't live there or religious minorities or anything else. But like, it seems like a kind of straightforward one. Like, if you're kind of pale, you got reddish hair, you're good to go. However, it's changing. Here's some video of Ireland's St. Patrick's Day festival just last week. All right, so look, it's nice to see some people wearing green, but you've got all kinds of different flags. You've got all kinds of different garb. Remember, Ireland is not a melting pot the way America is. I like the Irish healthcare workers for Palestine. How do they feel about the Irish traditions and culture? You have to wonder. So that, in essence, is a visual example of what Conor McGregor is fighting against. And no, it does not mean that he is racist or anything like that. Tracy O'Mahony, who's an ex-political commentator, wrote this. In June 2024, the Irish government voted to opt Ireland into the EU Migration and Asylum Pact against the wishes of the Irish people. Ireland has until June of 26 to pass the necessary laws needed to enact the pact. Since June of 2024, there has been silence from the government regarding the pact. Less than 1 week ago, Conor McGregor stood on the world stage and declared that Ireland has a mass, unvetted, uncontrolled immigration problem, and that should he run and be elected president of Ireland, he would do all in his power to challenge the pact. Today, the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, has secured government approval to submit Ireland's national implementation plan for the EU Asylum and Migration Pact to the European Commissioner, with Minister of State for Migration, Colm Brophy, stating that we are not waiting for June 26 to make changes to our systems. Be under no doubt that the government are running scared, because if Conor McGregor secures a nomination needed to run for the presidency, and if he can run on an immigration platform, he stands a good chance of being elected the next president of Ireland. So what is the answer? The government will do everything in their power to remove debate around the EU Migration Pact by endeavoring to pass all of the necessary laws before November 2025. This government is rotten to the core. So you see what's happening here. It's the same thing that we're seeing in so many of these countries, whether it's Britain or France or partially what we even had to do here in America, certainly what's going on in Canada. The native people of a country who wish to have Western values and who wish to maintain their culture and everything else don't want to just be overrun with people and have to live under the whims and wishes of unelected bureaucrats that live somewhere in Brussels. It's not much more complicated than that, and it doesn't make anyone racist, and it's just fine if an Irishman wants to go to the pub with his shillelagh, have a Guinness, and, smack around his wife after. Or maybe not that part, but you know what I'm saying. Conor McGregor tweeted this, against the wishes of the Irish people, modus operandi of a government that has long since abandoned the voices of its people, the people of Ireland. Everything said in the White House true, and we fight, fight, fight. Hey guys, let's get real for a sec. Anyone else feel like they're drowning under credit card bills, personal loans, or maybe even some leftover medical debt? It's like no matter how hard you work, your money's just slipping away to lenders instead of staying with you. I've been there and it's exhausting. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to stay this way, and that's where PDS Debt comes in. PDS Debt isn't just about managing your debt, it's about taking charge of it. Their platform digs into your specific financial situation, not some one-size-fits-all nonsense, and builds a plan that's tailored just for you. But they're not here to slap a Band-Aid on it. They're about finding a path to financial freedom that actually works with your life. And get this, no minimum credit score required. Whether your credit's taken a beating or it's just okay, PDS Debt is ready to help you save more, knock out out that debt faster and finally start building up your savings again. Here's what you need to do. Get started at pdsdebt.com/Rubin to complete your free debt assessment to see what options are available to you. Every day you wait, it's costing you money. Get started with your free debt analysis in just 30 seconds at pdsdebt.com/Rubin. That's pdsdebt.com/Rubin. Take back control by visiting pdsdebt.com/Rubin. You've got this. Let's make it happen. And we thought this was interesting. Here's just a guy that was going around. He appears to be a local Irish journalist, going around talking to people about Conor McGregor and the immigration problems and much more. And this is just a regular lady. And yeah.
Would you support Conor McGregor if he were to become the president of Ireland?
Yes, I would definitely support Conor McGregor. What Conor McGregor said in the White House last week was extremely accurate and very, very true of how the people of Ireland, North and South, feel about illegal mass migration. Now, I fully understand that we have all made mistakes, and some people might say Conor's made a mistake in the past. Well, guess what? So have I. I've made a lot of them. It doesn't mean that what I say today is not true. And he was speaking facts.
Do you think Conor McGregor is the last chance for Ireland before they go too far in the wrong direction?
I'll tell you this. I'm frightened for the direction that we're going in, and we need a real big change. And I think it has to be something like the Donald Trump in America, and Conor McGregor, from what I can see, is maybe our best hope.
First off, that woman's great. She wants to run for politics here in America. Come on over, lady. Get on board. Yes, we've all made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. It does not mean the truth that Conor McGregor or she is laying out today is wrong. What was his name? Nick Shirley? Nick Shirley is the name of the guy, by the way, who was doing that interview there. And again, none of this has anything to do with racism. What they're realizing is they're losing their country. And now I want to connect this to something that's happening here in America. This story is really, really wild. So in Plano, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas, and Texas, obviously a huge, huge state. There's an awful lot of land. They're doing an awful lot of building there. And it's one of, the big three states, I would say, Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, that all of the blue state people are fleeing to. Well, there have been plans put into place for a giant Islamic mega city. But don't take my word for it. Take this guy's word for it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, I'm sure many of you have heard of the amazing project that we're doing known as Epic Cities. We are, alhamdulillah, constructing an entire city half an hour from downtown Dallas, literally 30 minutes from our own Plano Masjid over here. It's going to be a city of over 1,000 people. Alhamdulillah, we launched this website last year and we sold the entire phase 1 within days. Because of the demand, we are now opening up Epic Ranches. Epic Ranches is an exclusive opportunity for those who want to be within minutes of Epic City, but also want larger plots. We have 2 Epic Ranches. Epic Ranches 1 begins with 1 acreage and goes up to 5 acreage. And Epic Ranches 2 has plots of ½ acre and also investment opportunities for those who want to build condominiums. Brothers and sisters, this is a limited time opportunity. It is an amazing time to invest for the future, not only in yourselves, but of your children after you. We are, inshallah ta'ala, going to change the entire da'wah scene by demonstrating to the world what it means to be a Muslim living in the West.
Okay, there's a bunch of things to talk about here. First off, if you're an American, any American has any right to live anywhere. There's no such cities. That's a Christian city. There might be a city where mostly Christians live. There might be a city where mostly Muslims live, Dearborn, Michigan. There might be a city where mostly Jewish people live, Little Enclave in Brooklyn. All these things are possible. But you can't stop other people from living there. Now, I don't know that this group of people have stopped anybody, but do you think you'd be welcome there if you were a Jewish family? Do you think a Christian family would be welcome there? Do you think you'd be able to open up any other type of place of worship besides a mosque? You think 3 Christian families could come in and open up a church? Do you think the Jainists are going to be welcome over there? How's it going to go for, I don't know, gays or lesbians or the bis or whatever else? So this does represent I would say, a real divergence from what America is all about. And interestingly, Texas, almost 10 years ago, did pass a law banning Sharia law, which is obviously Islamic religious law, which dictates really over, it's a religious system and a political system over the people's lives who choose to be part of it. Lara Logan, who's an actual investigative journalist, she wrote this, breaking, Attorney General Ken Paxton announces investigation into Islamic mega city development in Plano, Texas. Epic, and that's what it is right there. Look, it is worth thinking about this stuff, guys, and it doesn't make you bigoted to say, okay, this group of people over here shouldn't have a city in the United States that is just for them, that won't be accommodating to other people. You want to have whatever your religious beliefs are, and you want to have your places of worship and your way of life and all of your things, that's fine. But we don't want to take the beautiful melting pot of America and turn it into the sort of segregated version of Europe. We do not want to do that. So we'll see what happens in Texas. I don't think they're going to put up for it, and we will see for sure. Guys, let's talk about G-Defy for a second. We'll have a RubinReport.locals.com community Q&A in just a sec. You guys know I'm all about logic and reason. Well, here's some logic. If your feet are killing you at the end of the day, you need better shoes. That's why I love G-Defy shoes by Gravity Defier. Unlike trendy sneakers, these are built on real shock-absorbing technology. Their patented VersoShock system absorbs impact, returns energy, and helps align your body so whether you're walking, running, or standing all day, it feels effortless. Right now, my listeners get 30% off orders over $120. Just text Rubin30 to 91888 or visit gdefy.com and use code Rubin30 at checkout. Use logic, choose comfort, G-Defy. All right, community Q&A, here we go. Olaf says, dogs are pack animals. Would you ever get a buddy for Clyde? They really do entertain each other. I think we have some pictures of Clyde from this morning. There's Clyde right there. He's hanging out on the couch. He's taken over that one cushion because the kids have taken over pretty much everything else, and they've got their little dome there in the corner. I kind of like hanging out on the dome. It's pretty cool. Would we ever get another dog? No, not at this juncture. There's a lot of running around and food all over the place and messes and everything else. Clyde, he's a great dog. Many of you know the story. Got him right before lockdowns, so just as lockdowns were starting. Our dog before, Emma, had just passed away, 16 years old. We had just put her down. We didn't want to get another dog, but I heard they were going to kill all these dogs at shelters. I ran into a shelter. I didn't even have a mask. Saved him. He's with us. He's great. He's a good guard dog, but it's just a bit much. It's a bit much. I would love maybe in another time, or if we move to a farm one day, having more animals in general and maybe some more dogs. I don't know. We'll see. But right now, we're focusing on small humans. That's where we're at the moment. Elizabeth says, do you think leftists will understand that siding with jihadists is dangerous before they're thrown from a roof or as they're being thrown from a roof? Well, generally, as you're being thrown from a roof, you do start rethinking things. I mean, look, look, Queers for Palestine. And as I wrote in Don't Burn This Book, Queers for Palestine is very different than Palestine for queers. How do these queers, whatever that means, I don't know, are they gay or they got a little of everything or they got nothing or whatever it is, but how do they think they would be treated by Hamas? We picture the Hamas guys with the masks and the thing and the knife and the gun and the whole thing. Like, do you think that they would like you? So the problem with burying your head in the sand is that you just get buried a little bit low. You just get beheaded a little bit lower on the neck. It does not work. And this sort of what they call the red-green alliance, the alliance between the Islamists and the communists, and that's in essence what the queers are. It is not going to end well for you guys. Like, you can bow to them forever, and either you will live on your knees or you will be beheaded. It's as simple as that. Rich on the Farm, I believe it was your birthday yesterday, Rich. Happy birthday. Says, have you noticed how disingenuous people often start with "so you think" as a way to mischaracterize your opinion and then criticize what they hallucinate? So when I was reading this question before, I like to take a quick glance before that immediately reminded me of one of Jordan Peterson's greatest hits. This is when Jordan and I were on tour. This is back in early 2018. He went on Kathy Newman's show in Britain, and this illustrates perfectly what you're laying out right there.
So you say, I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crime, but you're just saying that's the way it is.
And
So
that
you're
you can
saying
rely on.
women, is that what you're saying? But you're saying basically, well, that's just a fact of
No,
life.
it's saying
Women
it
aren't
doesn't
necessarily
matter, because I'm very, very, very careful with my words.
But you're
Yes.
saying You're saying it's not. You say women, so you're saying women are just more sensible. So you're saying that. So you're saying give people equality of opportunity, that's fine. But still women aren't going to make it. That's what you're really saying.
It depends on your measurement technique.
To succeed is what you're saying.
Most
You're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies?
No, I didn't say that at all.
You said that.
First off, Jordan has really had to glow up over the years too, huh? But that thing where Jordan, do you know anyone in the history of the world that speaks more clearly than Jordan? Does he do a lot of high level ideas and sometimes you have to think about what he's saying for a sec? Yeah. But does he choose his words carefully and make a declarative statement every time something comes out of his mouth? The answer is obviously yes. So that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. There's this condescending way of, here, I said something. Oh, so what you're saying is, and then it's never exactly what the person was saying. Leftists do this constantly. They have a lot of linguistic tricks. I think it's also why so many of them, when I play these clips of The View or some of these other shows with these women, they talk like Valley girls. There's something about that. Or even something about why are all the men on CNN asexual? There's something about that a way of thinking that leads to weird mnemonic tricks and speech patterns and all of these things. I would prefer somebody who just speaks from the heart, tells you what they think. You go from there and see what happens, whether you agree with them or not. Shecky Green says, in my view, I smell a rat. How on earth does the most prolific Donald J. Trump hater anywhere get in this restricted chat room? So, of course, you're talking about this Signal story, and there's a lot to think about here. I really, really tried to cover it as cleanly and honestly as possible, fully admitting and accepting that if this was a Biden administration thing, I'd probably be going a little bit harder on it because Biden wasn't competent. Nobody around him was competent. The entire Biden administration actually was a scandal. And as the years go by, it will become more and more obvious. But as it pertains to this, there's this group chat. You've got JD, you've got Tulsi, you've got Marco, Pete Hegseth, you've got some of the primo all-stars of the administration in there. They're debating and discussing what their plans are as far as military strikes with the Houthis while we're doing it. So it wasn't some sort of secret that we were doing anything against the Houthis to get these trading ports open in the Red Sea. And then there's now some debate because Jeffrey Goldberg, who is in essence a leftist, he's an Atlantic never Trumper guy, somehow got in the chat. It sounds like Mike Waltz, NSA Mike Waltz, put him in the chat, or whoever set up the chat through Mike Waltz, wasn't one of his guys did it. So was there an absolute moronic kind of boomer level screw up of who got in the chat? Yeah. Have we all accidentally texted the wrong person because you think you're texting one friend whose name is Frank and it turns out you texted the other Frank? Everyone's done it. Have you accidentally put someone in whatever? That doesn't excuse any of it, but that's just like a flat out obvious mistake. Now, I think you're arguing that perhaps there's something a little more nefarious there, like how did maybe someone else put him in Signal? Perhaps. I don't think anything's off the table, actually. The real question here is, if you read what was going on in the thread, which we showed you much of this week, it's like there's honest debate happening there. And JD's talking about how do we frame this properly for the American people who may not have an appetite for it and everything else. That's also the backdrop of the fact that the strikes all worked, right? The strikes, no Americans got hurt or anything else. And we sent a warning to the Houthis, you got to stop doing this. Okay, fine. The real question now is, what do you do about Mike Waltz, who apparently is the guy that let him in, or someone that he sets up his phone or whatever. And then I saw all sorts of people, and I got into a big debate on this on Piers Morgan, claiming that you're not allowed to use Signal for classified information. That is actually still a little unclear to me. We showed you the video yesterday of incoming CIA Director Ratcliffe saying that he was given a computer with Signal on it and told by the CIA people that he's allowed to communicate on there. So there's a lot of stuff here. So I don't think using Signal is illegal for these people. The question is, how long does the kind of scandal last? In some sense, and I'm just giving you the pure politic version of this. I'm not giving you the pure legal version. In some sense, I think Trump just has to plow through this thing. Waltz did something stupid. Trump has to decide if he wants to fire him or not. That seems fairly obvious, again, unless something really weird happened. But beyond that, I think you just keep moving forward. Nothing in that chat was anything different than what these people are saying publicly. It showed thoughtful policy and debate, and that's all good. Crafty Barb says, how do we get out of this mess? I'm not sure which mess you're talking about, Crafty Barb, but it seems like we're in less messes than we were, say, 6 months ago, right? Like, there's some stuff. The signal thing is something. Ireland's got some stuff going on. There's some problems all over the world. But like right now, how do you get yourself out of this mess? How about stand up straight with your shoulders back, tell people what you think, fight for what you believe in, live in a place with like-minded people so you can build great things together, build a family, do that kind of stuff. I think that is pretty solid generally, even without knowing what specific mess you're talking about. Susan says less educated people can be controlled and paid less. So is that why you allowed 12 to 20 million illegally into our country? I think what you're referencing there, Susan, is we played a clip of Sunny Hostin. God bless that racist loon, Sunny Hostin, on the Don Lemon podcast. And she was basically saying, we need public education because if we don't have public education, then everyone's going to be stupid. Of course, never referencing the fact that test scores are going down. Kids can't read at 5th grade levels until they're in 8th grade in certain places. Like there's so many, and they're being taught all the wrong things and everything else. But of course, you're completely right. Everything they say can just be peeled back so easily. And it's just pure nonsense. Like, okay, so you're right. And right. So you're connecting it to the immigration thing. So it's like, all right, let all these people in and they'll work our jobs. Then they'll be replaced by robots. Then they'll go to state schools and they'll get government handouts. And what will we have at the end? While at the same time, you told them that they moved to a systemically racist place, Sonny. It's strange, Sonny, because you aren't going anywhere because you're making an awful lot of money telling people how terrible it is here. Let's talk about crowd health, and then we got more questions on the other side. Hey guys, let's talk about something that drives me up the wall, health insurance. I mean, is there anything more frustrating? That's exactly why I'm excited to tell you about Crowd Health. This isn't your typical health insurance. It's a smarter, better way to handle healthcare through crowdfunding. Instead of funneling your hard-earned cash to big insurance companies that seem to make a profit by not paying your bills, Crowd Health flips the script. They're shaking things up by cutting out the middleman and making healthcare straightforward and affordable. So how does it work? With Crowd Health, you're joining a health insurance alternative that's all about real support. For just $175 a month for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you get access to a community ready to step up when you need it most. We're talking about telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and tons of other perks. No doctor networks holding you back. The best part, you're part of the crowd, a group of folks like you and me who pitch in to cover each other's unexpected medical costs. It's simple, it's human, and it's a game changer. Here's the deal. Let Crowd Health help you with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months by using code DAVE at joincrowdhealth.com. Oh, and a quick note, Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com. Code DAVE. Trust me, your wallet and your sanity will thank you. Tarp says, what's brown and sticky? Who selected the questions today? Joseph. What is brown and sticky? A Jello pudding pop. It's delicious and it's brown and it's sticky. Theo, do you want one? NY 53813. Lake and Riley was white. Does Tiffany cross care? Oh, well, what you're referencing is that CNN clip that we showed you with Scott Jennings getting into it with this girl, Tiffany Cross. And of course, what she's basically arguing is that Trump is racist because, we're deporting people and some of these people happen to be brown. And she said something like, oh, and if they were taking white babies away from their mothers, we'd be up in arms. And it's like, they're not taking brown babies away. There were no brown babies put on those planes that went to El Salvador. But then he brought up the point, Scott Jennings brought up the point, well, how about we care about Lake and Riley, et cetera? Lake and Riley, young girl, happened to be white, murdered by an illegal immigrant. Well, let's put it this way. If she was black, more people would know her name. I think we know that much. We did live through BLM, did we not? But that's the sad thing. Like, if you don't really if your principles are all connected to whatever the political hot button thing is of the day, you're going to take any position and over time seem crazy. That basically sums up the modern progressive. If you have principles, like actual principles, then you can hold them regardless of the political trends. And it's one of the reasons that Scott Jennings is just doing a bang-up job over on CNN. I honestly think they might be like it's like they're all being punked right now. They're like, what idiot? Can we get another idiot to sit with this guy? Because those are the clips that go viral, even if it makes our network look bad. Marcus says, doesn't Jasmine Crockett's gaslighting remind you of that other relay runner who hit the one in the head with the baton and then claimed it was an accident? Do we have video of this? This is incredible. I don't know how we didn't show this on the show earlier in the week. Look at this. Look at this. That's not how you don't, that, no.
That's not how you do the relay. Everyone knows the relay. You're running, and then the person in front of you is running, and they back here, and then you don't hit them over the baton. That's like a perfect visual example of what Jasmine Crockett is. But that's what all the Democrats are at this point. That's actually a great example of just like, that's her in AOC, right? AOC was running in front of her. She couldn't take it. She has now banged AOC in the head with the crazy baton. AOC is off going that way. She's hanging out with Bernie for a little bit. But watch out, AOC could have a comeback. She can get a bigger baton and smack Crockett. And that will be that. All right, one more for you, and then I got to get on a plane to New York. Izzy says, what is the best dessert and why is it ice cream? Well, Izzy, you are absolutely right. It is ice cream. I don't do much dessert these days, although it was Connor's birthday. We went out. You know what we did? You people will appreciate this. So you know Connor loves Chili's. Everyone knows it. Millions of people across the world know that Connor loves Chili's. We told him all day long that we were going to Chili's, and he was so excited. He dressed up in his Chili's outfit. It was the whole thing, and we were talking about the salad bar and the wings and the baby back ribs and the sauce all over your face. And then Phoenix said to me, Dave, the Rubin Report's a professional operation. Can we do a little bit better than Chili's? And we took him to my favorite Mexican joint in Miami. It's called Coco in Coconut Grove. And we got did we have any pictures of that? Do we have some pictures of those steaks? Yeah, throw up a picture. We got 2 Wagyu tomahawks that were and we had some tequila, and it was a good night. But connect that to dessert. He did blow out a candle on a churro. However, ice cream, yes. I don't eat much dessert. Ice cream, you give me a little mint chocolate cookie, I'm a happy guy. Maybe once a month. That's it. Trying to keep it clean around here. All right, guys, Gutfeld, the #1 show in late night tonight, and then I believe I'm on Fox and Friends tomorrow morning. Not sure what time that'll be. They kind of adjust you as the day goes by. And Jesse Waters tomorrow evening, couple podcasts during the day, and we'll be sure to get a bunch of stuff up. Thank you. Adios.